Ned Stark tells Cersei Lannister that he knows her 3 children were never Robert's, and then he tells her to leave the city before the king comes home from his hunt. Everybody remembers the accusation. Almost nobody looks at the instruction that comes after it, and the instruction is the strange part, because there is no price attached to it. He asks her for no confession and no hostage. He asks her for nothing at all. He hands over the most valuable secret in Westeros to the one person it destroys, and he takes nothing back. The instruction itself sounds ordinary. Leave, take the children, be gone before Robert returns. That is the whole of it, spoken by the only man in that garden holding every card, and there is nothing behind it. The absence is what this video is about. A man trying to win a negotiation does not talk like that. A man trying to empty a building does. If Ned was emptying a building rather than winning a confrontation, then 4 of his later decisions stop being 4 separate failures of judgment and turn into one rule, applied again and again at rising cost, until it kills him. That is the argument. The proof for it sits outside the Godswood entirely, in a corridor 2 nights later, when the winning move walks up to Ned's door and offers itself for free, and he says no. Take the scene as it actually plays. Ned states his finding and gives her no room to deny it, because he is not asking a question. Cersei does not fold. She does not weep or bargain either. She confirms it, and she confirms it with something close to pride, which tells you she has already worked out that the truth costs her nothing in that garden. Then he sets the clock against Robert's return, and tells her to be far away when it runs out. A man in his position had options he did not take. He could have kept the children in the Red Keep as surety for their mother's safe passage. He could have required a written admission to put in Robert's hand. He could have required Jaime's name in her own writing. He could have simply stayed quiet for 1 more week and cleared his own household out of the city first. All 4 are available to him, and he takes none of them. The shape of the offer rules things out, so work backwards from it. If Ned wanted leverage over the Lannisters, the children were the leverage. Declining to take it would be one thing. He pushed it out of his own reach entirely, by telling their mother to run and take them with her. You cannot hold a hostage who is on a ship to Braavos. Whatever he thought he was doing, he did it at the direct expense of his own bargaining position, deliberately, with his eyes open. If he wanted a case to lay in front of Robert, he needed corroboration, and what he actually had was a book of old genealogies and an inference, against a flat Lannister denial that is thin, and Ned was clever enough to know it was thin. Warning: Cersei destroyed any chance of ever getting better. The moment she knew that he knew, every remaining thread of Jon Arryn's investigation became something the Lannisters had a reason to cut. And one of those threads was a boy working a forge on the Street of Steel. And if he was protecting himself, silence was the answer. Sansa and Arya were inside the Red Keep. His guard had already been cut down in the street by Jaime's men. Speaking first, in the capital, with his daughters in the building, is the worst option on the board for a man whose priority is his own skin. There is a 4th reading, and it is by far the strongest of them. On this one, Ned is not protecting children at all. He is protecting process. He warns Cersei because the judgment belongs to Robert and not to him, and he later turns down what Renly offers, because seizing the royal children while the king still breathes is treason under any law Ned recognizes. The constraint would be legality, held by a man who genuinely believed the law meant something, even when it cost him everything. That reading covers the Godswood, and it covers something the first 3 cannot touch, which is why Ned walks into an open throne room and announces Stannis' claim instead of quietly taking the city with the men he had. The first 3 readings collapse on the details, and one function survives all of them. The warning gets 3 children out of the city before their father learns what they are. That is the only outcome the offer is built to produce, and it is the only thing Ned asks for. The 4th reading is harder, and it does not die in the Godswood. It dies 2 episodes earlier. The show hands over the receipt there. The small council votes on whether to have Daenerys Targaryen killed. She is a teenager, she is pregnant, she is on the other side of the world, and Robert wants it done anyway. Ned refuses. He argues it in front of the whole table, he loses the argument, and then he resigns the handship rather than put his name on it. That resignation cost him more than people remember. The handship was the 2nd most powerful office in the 7 Kingdoms. It was the only position from which he could finish Jon Arryn's investigation. It was the only reason his daughters were safe in that city, and he put it on the floor rather than authorize one killing. Corruption disgusted him. The crown's debts disgusted him. Robert's whoring disgusted him. He sat through all of it, and then he walked out over a child. That is the thing the legalist reading cannot absorb. The order concerning Daenerys was not unlawful. It came from the king, and it carried the small council. A man whose deepest commitment is to lawful process complies with a lawful order he dislikes, or he objects on the record and then complies. Ned does neither. He puts the second highest office in the realm on the floor, rather than sign a lawful instruction, and the only unusual feature of that instruction is the age of the person it names. The Godswood itself gives the same reading a second problem, warning Cersei was a breach of process on its own terms. A man serving the crown's law informs the crown first, and lets the king decide who gets told and when. Ned told the accused before he told the sovereign, and handed her a head start while he was at it. Deference to law does not usually run in that direction. Something narrower is at work, and it was already at work weeks before he ever stood in that garden. There is one more piece, and it is not a decision taken under pressure. It ran for most of a decade. Theon Greyjoy came to Winterfell as a boy after his father's rebellion, handed over as surety for Balon Greyjoy's future behavior, which is the courteous arrangement for a hostage, and every adult involved understood the terms exactly. Balon rebels again, and the boy dies. That was the entire function of him. Theon's older brothers were already dead by then, which left him the only male heir his father had, and a hostage is worth precisely what the man holding him is prepared to do. So Ned Stark kept a child in his own hall for years, on exactly the terms that make a hostage useful, and he raised him at his table beside his sons. He taught him to fight. He let him keep his name and his father's sigil. Whether that was decency or a failure of statecraft is a genuinely separate argument, and there is a strong case it produced a young man who belonged nowhere and knew it. What matters here is narrower than that. When Ned already held the peace, he still would not play it. For a long time I read the Godswood as the moment Ned lost the game. I do not think that anymore. He lost it 2 nights later, in a corridor, and he lost it by choice. Robert is dying in the next room. Renly Baratheon comes to Ned with his own men, armed and ready that night, and the proposal is blunt. Take Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen now, immediately, while Cersei is still at her husband's bedside and before anybody has time to organize. Hold them. Then dictate the succession from a position where the queen cannot move against you without her own children paying for it. Look at the board when that offer is made. Jaime is not in the city. Tywin's host is in the Riverlands, days away at the very best. The gold cloaks have not been bought yet, by anyone. Cersei has a household guard and a king's guard whose commander is in the field. Against all of that, Ned has his surviving Stark men and the authority of the Hand restored to him. He has a document naming him Protector of the Realm, and now he has Stormlander swords, handed over for nothing by the king's own brother. It is the strongest hand Eddard Stark ever holds. It is almost certainly the only winning hand he has ever dealt. He turns it down. He does not argue the odds, and he does not argue the law. He says he will not shed blood in Robert's halls while Robert is still breathing, and he will not have children pulled out of their beds in the dark. 3 anchors now, from different years and different kinds of pressure, all pointing at the same constraint. The resignation cost him his office, and the corridor cost him the war. Theon cost him nothing at all, which is the strangest of the 3, because a man who has held a hostage for years and never once used him is not making a decision under pressure. He is following something. General honor has nothing to say about whether you take custody of a hostile queen's children during a succession crisis, and half the honorable lords in Westeros would have done it and slept soundly afterwards. Whatever Ned is following, it is narrower than honor. The strongest objection to all of this is simple, and I do not want to walk around it. The objection is that there is no rule at all. Ned is just a man who cannot hold information. He tells Robert to his face that he is resigning. He tells Littlefinger, of all people, that he has proof. He announces Stannis' claim in an open throne room full of Lannister men. On that reading, warning Cersei was never a strategy, just a man who could not stop talking, and I am building a cathedral on top of a personality defect. That objection breaks on one fact. Ned Stark kept a secret for 17 years, and it was the largest secret in the realm. He let his own wife believe he had fathered a bastard on some woman during the war. He let the North believe it. He let the boy himself believe it, and he watched what that belief did to the boy, and he still said nothing. A man who cannot conceal does not carry that for 17 years without cracking once. There is a sharper one. When Robert is dying and dictating his last instruction, he names his son Joffrey as his successor. Ned writes down that the throne passes to his rightful heir. He substitutes the wording of a dying king's final order in his own hand, and he does not correct the record afterwards. Ned would probably argue that he was writing down the law rather than falsifying a will, and there is a version of that argument that holds up. It was still a calculated act, committed by a man who supposedly cannot be calculating. The capacity was there the whole time. He used it once, on paper, in a room where no child was standing. There is a detail that damages the clean version of this reading, and I would rather put it in front of you than leave it out. Ned's own succession plan was lethal to those 3 children. Naming Stannis Baratheon meant handing the realm to a man who applies the law without mercy and burns people for considerably less than incest. 3 children publicly declared the products of it were not going to survive a Stannis accession, and Ned had known Stannis for 20 years. He knew exactly what kind of man he was elevating. So either he had not followed his own plan to the end, which is a real failure and not a small one, or he had followed it and was telling himself that a lawful outcome is a different thing from a murder. Neither of those flatters him. The rule protected those children from Robert's rage in the moment and pointed them at a colder death a year later, and he seems never to have run that arithmetic. He almost certainly never put any of this into words for himself, and I am not going to pretend the show gives us his reasoning when all it hands us is his choices. But the choices line up, and they line up around one thing, which is what happens to a child in the room. That is the constraint. It is narrower than honor, and it is the reason none of these decisions look strategic. What the warning bought was distance, measured in sea miles, between 3 children and a man who would know the truth about them inside the week. It bought 2 other things as well, and the second one is bigger. That second thing is a realm that does not repeat itself. Ned had fought 1 war over a throne, and then walked through what was left afterwards. If Cersei ran, the Lannisters were disgraced and gone, the succession fell to Stannis without a battle, and the whole thing resolved with an empty wing of the Red Keep instead of a field of dead men outside River Run. Ned was one of very few people in that city who had personally paid the alternative price. The third thing it buys is time for his own daughters. Sansa and Arya were in the capital. Inside the same stretch of days, he tells them they are going home and starts arranging their passage north. Put the Godswood warning next to that decision, and it reads as one half of a 2-sided evacuation run by a man who wanted every child out of that building before the adults began. It fails, and the reason it fails is the most interesting thing in the whole sequence. Ned priced Cersei as a mother holding a losing hand. She priced herself as a claimant holding a winning one. His offer assumed her best available outcome was survival in exile with her children alive. Her calculation was that her son on the Iron Throne was genuinely achievable, and that exile was a slower version of the same death. Underneath that, there is a harder failure, and it belongs to Ned. His offer required Cersei to believe that Robert would let her go once she ran. 17 years of marriage had taught her otherwise. She had watched that man carry a grudge against Rhaegar Targaryen across all 17 of them, against a man who was already dead, killed by Robert's own hand at the Trident, and she had listened to him talk about it as though the war had ended last week. Ned knew it better than anybody, because he was the one who stood up and said it out loud. At that council table, he had personally, publicly, at the cost of his office, argued that Robert would not let go of a Targaryen child he had never met. And then he offered Robert's wife a plan whose entire viability rested on Robert letting go of the woman who had put another man's children on his throne. The offer was unacceptable because of a fact Ned had witnessed, objected to, and resigned over, 2 episodes earlier. He gave her a door and did not notice that he had already told the whole council the door was nailed shut. From there, the rest of the arc reorganizes into one list. Warn the queen instead of seizing her children. Refuse Renly's swords instead of taking children from their beds. Go to Littlefinger for the City Watch, 2,000 men whose loyalty could be purchased, because purchased men do not require you to do anything to a child. Then confess to treason in front of the city, rather than let a hostage daughter pay for the truth. 4 choices the fandom has filed under naivety. They are the same decision, made 4 times, by a man with 1 lever permanently disabled in a game that only had that lever. The last one deserves the space. Standing in a black cell, told that his daughter is a hostage, Ned confesses to treason he never committed and names Joffrey the true king in front of the entire city. He surrenders his name, the thing he had guarded above his own life, to buy a child's safety. It is the same trade he offered Cersei in the Godswood, with the direction reversed and the price paid by him. Nobody outthought Ned Stark in that garden. Cersei was playing without a restriction he carried into every room, and he never once tried to put it down. The line nobody catches is the one with nothing attached to it. He gave her a deadline and a direction and no conditions, because he was not trying to beat her. He was trying to get 3 children out of a building before their father came home. It bought them nothing in the end. Joffrey died at his own wedding. Myrcella died in her uncle's arms on a ship. Tommen walked out of a window, and the man who tried to move all 3 of them off the board lost his head on the steps of the Great Sept, still refusing to use the only piece that would have saved him.